Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Ahmed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Deep left center field, it is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE Podcast. I am your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel Kirby. And tonight, we're just going to be previewing what's been going on throughout training camp thus far. We're currently losing a battle right now to the Kansas City Royals, 19-5. So just a typical Monday. The Monday Blues didn't come out too hot today, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been highlights over the last couple weeks. So I'm going to kick it off to Mel. Who's been hot and who's not?
Yeah, so I'm looking through my who's hot and who's not column, and I'm comparing it with the box score of this game currently going on, and some things have definitely changed a little bit. But to open it up, I am going to share my frustrations with this team right now because I had to adjust my show notes a little bit because I spent a lot of it hyping Gabriel Arias up because the kid has done nothing short of just spray the baseball all over the field all spring long for the second year in a row. Because if you remember, he did the exact same thing last year. And, Terry Francona's on record saying how he wanted to see Arias kind of force his way into that opening day lineup. This what looks to be a 28-man roster to start the season with. And he got sent to minor league camp today, which is so incredibly frustrating with this baseball team because not only are they not spending money externally, they haven't extended anybody internally, which we'll get to later in the episode, but they spend all this time when Antonetti and Chernoff, talk to the media, they're talking about how they want to see the kids play, which I could get behind that. If you want to see what all these young kids on the roster have, that makes sense. We mentioned it on last week's episode, I believe. You don't want to trade away the next star without giving him, a real shot to see what he can do at the major league level. But in the case of Gabriel Arias, he is by far performed well enough to be able to make this, make the major league roster breaking camp. And he only got sent down to minor league camp as, blatant service time manipulation, which, if I remember correctly, I think that was a big area that this 99-day lockout we all endured was supposed to address. So these kids who are very capable of playing at the major league level don't get held back in the minor leagues just so the organization can kind of get another year of service time out of them. So the lockout did not do its job. This is just another example of how there was, they did not accomplish the goals they set out to during this lockout and this new CBA negotiation. And that's frustrating to see because I'm sure Gabriel Arias is thinking, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to make this team? He was hitting .571 this spring with a 1.206 OPS, which is out of this world. And it's definitely good enough to, play second base or shortstop for this team this year. So, that's definitely a frustrating thing because it's like they want to see the kids play, but it's like that only applies to like Bradley Zimmer, Oscar Mercado, and Owen Miller. It's like, so that, I don't know about you, Max, but that is extremely frustrating to me.
Yeah, it is incredibly frustrating. The kid's doing everything he can to make the ball club this year. But it could have a little bit to do with how good our potential other second basemen have been playing throughout spring training. Yu Chang is, super hot right now. Ernie Clement, you and I were talking before the podcast. He has made every single adjustment he could have this offseason, and it's certainly paying off on the field. Yu Chang right now, he's batting .438. He's got 2 home runs, 8 RBIs. This is, by the way, these stats are before today's game with the Kansas City Royals, which is actually happening while we're recording. But Ernie Clement as well. He's got a .500 average. He's got a home run, 7 RBIs. And like Mel was just saying, Gabriel Arias, .571 average with a 1.206 OPS. So to me, it's kind of like a dilemma of who's going to land in that spot. You only have 40 guys, right? You only have 40 spots. Who's going to really land in that second base spot? I think that's where Yu Chang and Ernie Clement are really surpassing everybody's expectations, and that could be one of the reasons why Gabriel Arias was sent down.
Yeah, and by the end of spring, they're talking about allowing a 28-man active roster, at least for the month of April, just while pitchers kind of build their arms back up to pitch, a full 5-6 innings. Another one to look out for too is that outfield competition. Stephen Kwan and Richie Palacios have both performed really well over the course of the spring. And yesterday, actually, Richie Palacios was one of the guys sent back down to minor league camp, and Stephen Kwan still remains with the major league club. And I know Terry Pluto had an article over the weekend saying, he's been hearing that one of Kwan and Palacios is going to make that active roster out of spring training. So it's really looking like Stephen Kwan's going to be that guy. He's hitting .429 with 2 RBIs and 5 runs scored. And, just another tool that he has. He's had 0 strikeouts and 14 plate appearances, which might not seem like a big feat, but he has a 9.2% career strikeout rate, which is outstanding. Just his ability to make contact with the baseball. Like it's something he's done since college. He's just always had this sweet swing. And as a result of that swing, we saw a lot more power out of him, at Akron and into Columbus last year, which, wasn't so much him trying to hit home runs as much as it was just kind of the reward of having such a nice swing. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to do for this team. He's definitely going to provide a little bit of a pop offensively. I think between him and Miles Straw, they're definitely going to be able to get on base fairly regularly. It's just going to be a matter of if they play Kwan in left or right, which I think you have some flexibility there. We've been hearing the team talk about how Ahmed Rosario is going to play a little bit more left field, opening the year up, which I think is good because, like you mentioned, all that middle infield talent, Max, and that kind of gives guys like Ernie Clement and Andres Jimenez at short, their chance to prove they can be that everyday guy there. And it's just a matter of if Kwan's arm can play in right field or not. But I'll take a little bit weaker of an arm if it means getting on base more than Bradley Zimmer has this spring.
Yeah, and especially with the starting pitching we have, we've thrown out guys in the outfield. I mean, we were playing Franmil Reyes there for a little bit. You think that he's the optimal outfielder? Absolutely not. But what he can provide on the offensive end is, a massive contribution throughout the year. You're obviously going to put him in that spot every single day of the week. Thankfully, I mean, we have the ability to put him as a DH, keep him healthy for the most part of the year. But yeah, Stephen Kwan, it'll be exciting if he ends up making the 40-man roster. He was somebody we were speaking about a couple of weeks ago, and to see him batting .429, couple runs scored, and like you were just saying, 0 strikeouts and 14 plate appearances. Clearly, he's got a good eye at the plate. He's making the most of what he's doing while he gets on base. So, it's something I'm happy with. But guys like Bradley Zimmer, obviously not doing his job. He's only batting .133. He's got 10 strikeouts and 15 at bats. During the game today, I think he had another strikeout, but he also got another hit. So it's not really doing him too much. But it's just, we're looking for a change there. I think Zimmer's had his run. Maybe he'll get sent down at the beginning of the year and have a shot to earn himself another chance. But Stephen Kwan's looking like he might be that guy.
Yeah, and like just the sight of Bradley Zimmer in this lineup every day just blows my mind because, I mean, this guy, he's had more than enough chances to show what he can do. And for a team who seems unwilling to pay anybody, they gave him over $1 million in arbitration. They settled with him. And that leads me to believe, and he's out of options, so they'd have to DFA him. And paying him that much money, I have a hard time believing that the Dolans would be okay with eating that money if they get rid of him, which is just head scratching because they said they don't want to, Mike Chernoff was asked specifically about Michael Conforto on a radio show this weekend, and he reiterated, we don't want to go out and sign anybody who's going to take any at-bats away from these young kids that we have on the 40-man roster. But then it's like, to me, Bradley Zimmer is not one of the kids anymore. He's been around for some years now, and this is spring training, and he's hitting 133 with 10 strikeouts and 15 at-bats. Like, that's not a typo. Like, he's been that bad. And I think he's just so lost at the plate right now that it's only a matter of time before it starts affecting him defensively. We see that a lot in baseball when guys are going through some struggles at the plate. It tends to carry over into the field a little bit. And this might be another situation where he just needs a fresh start somewhere. I don't know. I'm not sure what kind of trade value he has right now, but I don't think he's really providing much to this club right now. I mean, I was talking on Kevin's podcast yesterday. I mean, even in a late game situation, he has a lot of value as a center fielder, which obviously we have Miles Straw there, but his, next best value would be kind of as a late inning defense pitch run situation. But I don't know about you, but if it's the 9th inning or we're in extra innings, I don't have faith in him that he's going to give us a productive at bat late in the game.
Right. And I can agree with that, but I was just thinking about the other end of the stick. Like there's two edges to this sword here. One, he's underperforming like no one could imagine. Like this is his worst case scenario right now, batting 133 with 10 strikeouts and 15 at-bats. But on the other side of the coin, we've seen him when he's been really good. Not necessarily he's batting at a great average, but when he makes good contact with the ball, I think this is what's keeping him around on the team. That ball flies. The velocity off the bat, it's up there. It's in the 100s. When he hits home runs, they're not just getting over the wall. They are deep, right? And then when it comes to his defense, we've seen him make the all-out grabs, right? The diving grabs, the crashing into the wall, right? We've seen him unload with that, with his arm to home plate and snag guys at the plate. So I think it's just that overall MLB experience he already has going along with what his ideal offensive performance could be is what's keeping him on the roster.
Yeah, and I think he's got kind of the similar struggles that Bobby Bradley is dealing with right now as well. It's like when he makes contact, he's probably going to hit a home run, but it's like he doesn't make contact half the time.
Right.
So it's like you're going to deal like Bobby obviously Bradley Zimmer's leading the team in strikeouts this spring, but Bobby Bradley's right behind him with 5 strikeouts and 15 at-bats, and he's only hitting 200. And I know a lot of fans are frustrated with his performance as well. I don't think his is to the extent, like my frustrations aren't as great with him as they are with Bradley Zimmer, just because Bobby Bradley's, he's getting up there in age for as far as prospects go, but he doesn't have the type of major league experience that Bradley Zimmer has. And if you remember, to open last year, we started with Jake Bauers, and any fan that I saw on Twitter was begging for Bobby Bradley to get called up. And Bobby Bradley's kind of in the same predicament where, we said it last year that Jake Bauers only made the opening day roster because he was out of options. So Bobby Bradley by default got sent back down to AAA, and we're all calling for Bobby Bradley. And if you remember when he came up in June, I think we were in Baltimore, he was on a tear hitting home runs. And then he started to cool off a little bit. He doesn't lay off those off-speed pitches, and he's got some growing to do at the plate. But I'm not ready to call for his head yet, like I see some fans doing. But he's another guy that I do think should be on kind of a short leash here. Because you can't have every corner spot struggling offensively besides Jose, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think the reason why Bobby Bradley gets, that shorter leash is because last year, like you mentioned, we did start with Jake Bauers and everybody was looking forward to Bobby Bradley, this kid that can hit balls to the moon, right? So, I mean, he started out that way, but then he quickly fizzled down to, it's what, his first major league season? Like, this is going to happen. He only has a sample size of what, 3/4 of a season. So to really judge him solely based off of last season, I think he does need a little bit more time. Like you were just mentioning, how much time have we given Bradley Zimmer? He's been on the roster since 2018, 2019. Like
he's out of options, not lives. Apparently.
Right. Right, exactly. So, I mean, Bobby Bradley, it's going to take him a little bit more time to get in the groove of things. I do see some potential, but I could also agree that he could be on a shorter leash, given that, Stephen Kwan is batting really nicely right now. Palacios is probably going to have a quick start up in the minors. So we'll have to see if he starts producing come, early April, early May.
Another thing to remember too, like kind of like the logjam we have, and this is why what we do with guys at the major league level matters to the guys below them. With Arias being optioned to AAA, he'll be Columbus's opening day shortstop. But then it's like by default, Brian Rocchio has to start at Akron as the shortstop, where he should be at AAA by now, just based on his performance. So at some point, we're going to have to see Gabriel Arias in the majors, if nothing else, other than Brian Rocchio needs to move up.
Right.
And at some point, depending on what they do with Jose, which we're obviously going to get to later in the episode, you kind of you need to see what you have in these top prospects, not these like journeymen, just graduated prospect rankings. Like with all the guys they added to this 40 man, like it's do or die time right now. I understand you might want to see some of these guys, but I mean, there's even guys like Jose Tena and John Kenzie Noel who, aren't quite major league ready, but they're on the 40 man roster. So when we open the year, you don't have much roster flexibility. What are you going to do? And we're starting to see it already with the bullpen and the catching position, which I know we're going to get into, where these injuries hit and you don't have many options because all these guys you need to turn to aren't even on the 40 man roster.
Yeah. I mean, tons of question marks still. And I know you and I, Mel, can both agree that we were hoping to be done with this nonsense long before now. So, I mean, the fact that we're still dealing with it, we come on here every single week, tell you guys not to get ahead of yourselves. It'll just be patient. Everything will come when it happens. But, I'm starting to really start to worry, what's the game plan here? Because the guys that you're throwing out there right now, they're not exactly performing the way you'd want them to. So now the younger guys are showing out, but are they truly ready, or are they having a nice couple weeks in Goodyear? I'm not exactly so sure what to think about it all.
Well, the log jam's about to get a little more backed up too, because Josh Naylor played in his second 4-inning AAA game in the last 3 days on Saturday night. And he actually played right field for all 4 innings. He went 2 for 4 at the plate. He could play in a Cactus League game tomorrow. I think the latest I've read is that he is on track to do that. And, I know a lot of us, I know I did, expected him to be out until at least May. With that ankle injury, that leg injury he had, I didn't think there was any way he could play before, maybe 10 months. And he's kind of on track. They're not ruling him out for opening day yet. So,
wow.
Again, he provides, some right field depth, some first base depth, depending on how Bobby Bradley comes out of the gate. But, he's another guy who can play a couple different positions. And in my opinion, they got to get him in there somewhere, just based on his energy, his toughness, and what he can bring to the team that, doesn't necessarily show up in the box score.
Yeah. But it's something that Terry Francona has always been very, very careful with, as at least for as long as I've been watching them, because he's not going to throw a guy out there if he's not exactly ready, healthy, I should say, for the season. So, worst case scenario, you put him out there for the opening week lineups, right? And something gets tweaked, and now he's set back for 2 months, when if you just let him rest for another 2-3 weeks, I know I'm one of the fans that says, if we lose a game in the 9th inning, I'm going to be heated, because we're going to look at these standings in a couple months, 5 months down the line, if we were to just win this game or just win that game. So I'm a guy that thinks that every single game matters. In the sense for Josh Naylor, though, I don't think he's exactly, not that he's not contributing to our wins, but he's not the game-winning player that necessarily needs to be out there at the start of the season. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's probably still more likely he kind of opens up at AAA because their season starts a little bit later, and it'll kind of just give him some time to slowly bring himself along for those reasons
Right.
that you had mentioned. But we've talked a lot offensively, but on the pitching side as well, Tristan McKenzie's been outstanding this spring. He's kind of been piggybacking Zach Plesac. so far this spring because just with the off days that April provides, I don't think they're going to start with a 5-man rotation necessarily. I think while these guys build their arms back up, I think we'll see, Bieber, Savali, Quantrill, and then you'll see Plesac and Tristan kind of piggybacking each other just, to kind of get these guys their innings slowly, bring them along. But I had on my who's hot guys, I had Adam Scott, but he went 5 innings without allowing a run. And then I look at the box score today and he started and allowed 8 runs in 1 inning with 3 home runs. So I think I can comfortably take him out of the who's hot column. But before we get into the bullpen, Eniel De Los Santos is a name to keep an eye on. He has an electric arm. He's got some control issues, which, as we know, a lot of guys with these power arms, they do early on, but he's pitched 3 innings, hasn't allowed a run, and he struck out 5. So, as we get into these bullpen issues, he's another guy. He's not on the 40-man roster, so he would have to be added. Somebody would have to be moved off the roster to add him on, but I think he might be a guy with these injuries who could get a shot early on.
Yeah. I mean, especially, with what we're about to transition into for our next segment, some question marks around the bullpen. Should anything happen throughout the season, if he keeps performing like this for at least, the next week and a half before the season starts, he's definitely on the Guardians' radar, right? I mean, just because you're sent down doesn't exactly mean you can't be called up again. And the injury history with this team, pretty much well that there's going to be a little blimp in this season, and we're just going to have to work our way around it. So he could be a name that we might be seeing, throughout, a couple months down the line. But to transition into that segment I was just speaking of, some bullpen question marks. Karinchak has just been shut down from throwing for 7 to 10 days. He can miss a month, maybe more, with a strained teres major muscle. And Cody Morris was also just shut down with the same injury. How do you
That's
think?
a bummer.
Yeah,
that Cody Morris one killed me because he's got such a good arm, but he's dealt with these kind of same injury concerns since college, and it's starting to become a little concerning that this is his second year in a row now where he's going to be starting the season late. And he really had a shot to make this opening day bullpen because he is on the 40-man roster. So if he could have avoided that injury, I think we would have seen him start the year in Cleveland.
Yeah, and it always amazes me, these tragic injuries that pitchers can't work their way around. Multiple Tommy Johns, multiple strained ligaments, right? Like, I always had a thought, like, if you could be a major league pitcher with all of your weapons, can you still be a major league pitcher with most of them? Like, I don't know what's exactly causing these injuries. I would assume it's off-speed throwing, right? When you're using all of that torque at your wrist and really, like, throwing sliders, curveballs, even some changeups, right? You're changing your mechanics. If you were to trim one of those pitches out of your arsenal, will it give you longevity throughout your career? It'd be a pretty cool sports science. That's for sure.
I think with young guys too, a lot of it is, you mentioned the mechanics, like, are they able to repeat their delivery? And
Right.
with a lot of young pitchers, that's a big issue for them. It's just kind of repeating the same throwing motion each time. Because when you go up there and you got different arm angles, different arm slots, that's when, you start to strain those muscles a little bit.
You also become more predictable, right? These major league hitters, they're in the major leagues for a reason, because they can hit the ball well. They can obviously play the field. But if you're not having that repetitive motion and you're kind of like basically showing them the pitch before it arrives to the plate, that's not a long-term success, right? That's going to be a roadmap for disaster. So.
Yeah, and the thing with this bullpen is there's still so many question marks. Like you obviously got Clase as the anchor at the end, which he's pretty much as close to a sure thing as we got. You got Nick Sandlin, but can he stay healthy? He obviously missed the end of last season. He's had injury concerns. As we predicted, you have Brian Shaw back, and it's like you gave him stupid money when there were better options out there. I think we mentioned last week he has the escalators up to $9 million a year, and you just kind of know what you're going to get with Brian Shaw. There were definitely better options they could have signed. I don't know if it came down to the number of years. But then you got Anthony Ghost from the left side. Can he consistently maintain his control? I think he had 3 or 4 appearances last year, so he doesn't have many major league appearances as a relief pitcher. And then Trevor Steffen, I'm guessing, makes it. And, I know Blake Parker and Brian Shaw were big for him last year, picking up that split finger pitch, but will he be able to pick up, where he left off with his success last year? And I mean, I guess the last guy at this point would be Henches because he's out of options, but like neither he or Logan Allen has looked very good this spring. I mean, Logan Allen had a nice bounce back game on Saturday. He pitched 3 innings, only allowed 2 hits and had 4 strikeouts. So that was really good to see out of Logan Allen. But, Henches just really hasn't brought it consistently. So I don't know how much you could really rely on him in that bullpen role. And then guys on the outside looking in would probably be De Los Santos, like I mentioned, and then Nick Mikolajchak, who I've talked a lot about. He's another guy who would have to be added to the 40-man along with De Los Santos, but they could be the best options behind these guys. But those 2 injuries, in the spring before they even break camp, those hurt.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not going to lie. It's been a really disappointing spring so far, like with all the emotional high that everybody was on when baseball returned, just to be, the laughing stock of the league currently. I would say, nobody's
other players calling us out.
Yeah, nobody's dogging on the Pirates. Nobody's ripping on the Marlins. It's us because we've been competitive in the past. We have guys like Jose Ramirez on the team, Shane Bieber, Aaron Savali, Terry Francona is our manager. We have a phenomenal GM in Chris Antonetti. You got Mike Chernoff as president of ops. Like, what are we doing? Now, look, the season hasn't happened yet. We don't know what the conclusion is going to be, but it's just frustrating to see all of these issues right now. No big splashes, a simple little backup catcher role. Like,
yeah,
and that's disappointing.
I really like that you bring that up because it's something I was planning on mentioning at some point. But, if this really is all we have left of Jose, it's really a shame that they're not trying harder to compete. Like, we're watching, I think, the best third baseman in all of baseball, and we have him for dirt cheap right now. And the fact that we haven't heard more, I know we'll get into the rumors in a bit, but the fact we haven't had more serious extension talks is concerning because if they're going to roll with these kids and if we're not in serious contention by the trade deadline, by the deadline or, I think more likely next offseason, he's going to get dealt. And just like that, we wasted the window of Jose Ramirez. 2017 was supposed to be that year, but they've been a little bit competitive every year since then, but I really would have liked to see him swing for the fences a little bit more and really try to give it one final serious run. Because if I'm Jose and they're coming to me talking about an extension, I'm going to be like, who are you putting around me? Because like I signed an extremely team-friendly deal. I came up through the minor leagues here. I love it here. I love the fans, but like I also want to win. Like it's my time to get paid and I want to win. Like what's the plan to these are nice guys, but what are we doing to seriously contend here? Our payroll is an embarrassment. Like I said, to the tone of other players in our division, talking shit about our payroll, which is humiliating.
Yeah, didn't Correa just sign with the Twins for almost as much per year as our entire payroll? Like, what are we sitting at? 34 million?
Yeah, like Deshaun Watson makes more than our entire payroll. Like, I really wish like Dan Gilbert or somebody would buy this team because I don't know what's happening with David Blitzer, but the fact we haven't heard anything about it and we didn't see any big spending makes me think that went south somehow. Because I really did. I feel like a fool because you talked about how we've been on here preaching patience and I've been keeping people calm all lockout and the whole spring saying they're going to do something. They have to make a move. This roster isn't going to work. And it really does seem like they are going to do nothing. And the fact that even though the organization talked about how poor the outfield was offensively last year, and the fact that they didn't do a single thing to upgrade that outfield, I don't even know what to say about it. Like, it makes me want to go play in traffic. Like, that's how frustrating this plan is. I don't know what. Like, the fact that you didn't go after plan C or D after Olsen and Winker fell through is just mind-blowing because the fact that they were even in on Olsen and Winker makes me think they were kind of willing to spend a little bit of money.
Right. And you brought up Blitzer, and we haven't heard anything else other than that original breaking news that we're trying to get somebody else involved. He has since started moving on to his own ventures. He got involved with another MLS team, and I believe a team overseas, in European soccer, right? So Chelsea is dealing with managerial or / owner issues themselves. So he hops on the bandwagon. I'm sure he's going to be making moves there. But like, what are we doing? Like, especially with the rebranding, we just got a new game. We're trying to bring back our fans, especially after the lockout, and this is what they get. The same squad from last year minus familiar faces. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, like at this point, Max, I would honestly take Oscar Gonzalez in right field right now. I really would. Like, he's hitting 353 with a home run and 6 RBIs. I know he doesn't ever walk. I know he struggles with off-speed pitches, and I know his defense isn't great. But honestly, with the power potential being what it is, they didn't add him to the 40-man over the winter, but they did re-sign him to another minor league deal. So the fact that they re-signed him to that minor league deal makes me think they like him enough to maybe see what he has. And it's funny, on the broadcast the other day, Rick Manning and Matt Underwood were saying how highly the organization thinks of him. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, they didn't even add him to the 40-man roster. Like, they should be higher on him, but they're not that high on him, or they would have added him to the 40-man along with every other decent prospect we have in this farm system.
I just feel like we're back in the days of Manny Acta, trying to get our way through a season, right? Like, what was it? The 2007, we went to the ALCS, and then 2008 through 2012, we were basically miserable, right? Yeah. Like, our first wild card appearance came against the Rays in 2013. That's when Danny Salazar was quickly taking over and on his way to a great major league career. Obviously, injuries got in the way of that. It's unfortunate, but like, from 2013 and on, we've been competitive. We had our window in 2016 and 17. It didn't hit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be going into 2022 after a lockout and a rebranding with absolutely nothing. I feel like I'm the Pittsburgh Pirates right now. How did we get here?
And it's like, after we had those, really competitive seasons in 16, and then, 17 was obviously a one and done, but they cut payroll every year after that. I mean, who does that? When you're having that much success, you're just like, okay, that was fun, but we're going to chop the payroll in half. And it's like, I really wish the Dolans understood the mindset of, like, you got to spend money to make a little bit of money. Like, as much as we may love Gabriel Arias, like, and Ahmed Rosario, like, they're not guys that are putting people's butts in seats. They're not getting people to buy tickets. Jose Ramirez, Shane Bieber, Fran Mil-Reyes, Matt Olson would have done that. Wilson Contreras, Brian Reynolds, these guys that they wouldn't go out and spend the money for. Even Michael Conforto would do it, and he's still out there. But It's like, I think they're underestimating just how much of ticket sales the common fan makes up. The common fan doesn't know much about even our top prospects, let alone guys like Bradley Zimmer and Oscar Mercado, who have no business starting every day. And that's frustrating to people who are already upset about the name change, upset about the lockout, the season starting late, and then you do nothing to excite this fan base. And I don't blame people for being upset about that, because they've completely butchered this rebrand in every possible way, and it's showing. Season ticket sales are already down.
Yeah, and take a page out of Dan Gilbert's book. As many people that would disagree with that statement, look, he didn't get it right when LeBron was here on his first time around, right? But then he drafts a kid like Kyrie Irving. He adds a couple small pieces here and there. Then he talks LeBron into signing again. We win a championship with Iman Shumpert, J.R. Smith, right? We had guys like Tristan Thompson, who we also drafted up with Kyrie. Like, if you see the process through, don't start cutting payroll, because you can always have a guy like, imagine if a guy like, I know we don't need a third baseman, but imagine if a guy like Chris Bryant pulled up to Cleveland and said, I'm going to spend the next 5 years.
And he can play the outfield. He'd be great. He would have been great. And the Rockies threw stupid money at him just for no reason. To trade him.
We haven't spent penny. I'm not even talking about hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts, which is, I'm sure Jose Ramirez is going to be looking for his money soon enough, and you don't want him getting frustrated, because I've never seen the guy like upset. Truthfully,
Yeah.
Like, he's always done his job. He's always been professional. He's always been mature throughout every single action he's taken thus far for our organization. The last thing you want is for him to be unhappy, and we're really close. We're getting there.
Yeah.
It's just disappointing.
Yeah. And, kind of coming off of that, speaking of guys that most of the common fans don't know much about, are the guys competing for this super utility spot. And these are the guys who are honestly performing almost better than anybody this whole spring. And that's Yu Chang, Owen Miller, and Ernie Clement. We mentioned their stats earlier, but all three of these guys really do the same thing. They can play all over the infield, and Ernie Clement can play a little bit of left field. So what do they do here? I mean, Yu Chang's out of options. So as we've talked about with Bobby Bradley and, Sam Henches, he might have a leg up just because of the fact he's out of options. But I had him as a trade candidate this offseason, but it didn't happen. Maybe this is kind of boosting his value for a trade during the season just because he's getting a little bit older, but he's a guy that could provide a lot of value to a team who has some injuries early on in the infield. But my scenario was ruled out. I had a scenario where one of them starts at second and one of the remaining two is the utility guy, which I mean, that could happen, but now that Gabriel Arias is out of the picture. But for some reason, I was holding out hope that Gabriel Arias would get a well-deserved shot at one of those middle infield spots. So with Arias out of the picture, I think now that they'll keep 2 out of the 3.
Yeah, if I had to pick 2 out of 3, it's an easy call. Owen Miller, maybe a different time, but Yu Chang and Ernie Clement, they have that experience, right? Owen Miller also has his major league experience, but I think we've seen that Ernie Clement has shown those flashes of greatness on the defensive end, and he's also just bottom line a hard worker, and we've seen that over the offseason, and currently right now he's having a spring training to remember, maybe one that earns him a couple significant months on the team this year. But
I
then
think he still has an option too. I might be
Right.
wrong on that, but I think he's still got an option, so we wouldn't be losing him.
Fair enough.
Which is good.
But then another guy like Yu Chang, like this guy is just he's how can you root against him? Yeah, sure, he grounds into a double play here and there, right? He'll have his Jason Kipnis moments, right? But that's another guy, Jason Kipnis, not exactly a power ball at the plate, right? He did his job on the defensive end, and he had a couple clutch hits here and there, and he quickly became a fan favorite that we were all, beloving of. And I think Yu Chang can play that same scenario. He might not be an everyday sort of starter, but he's definitely a guy who's well earned his time on the field.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like Yu Chang had me when he was posting those off-season videos working out in Korea, and there's like roosters in the background, there's traffic behind him, and he was just staying ready, and it's showing early in this spring. Like he came out of the gates like a guy who had something to prove. He probably sees everybody saying, he's done, they should trade him. There's kids coming behind him, and he's like, not so fast. Like I still got something to prove here, and I want to show everybody. Like he's had a grand slam this spring already. So I definitely agree with you that I would probably keep Chang and Clement at this point, just because Clement provides you some flexibility in left field too. And his defense is spectacular. Like there's not a game. It doesn't matter where on the diamond Ernie Clement's playing. Like he's going to give it all he's got, and he's going all out for any ball that he has any shot at getting. And that's really valuable to this team and this pitching staff.
That's why I brought up Jason Kipnis. Was there ever a game where he didn't walk away with dirt absolutely all over that uniform? Like
him and Lindor were great.
Right. He's a kid that works really hard. And if it's a ball up the middle that he thinks he can grab, which is every single one of them, he's going to go for it. Right. And it's just, I'm eager to see what he can end up doing once we get the season started, and he might get put in there on a regular basis. So I've always been a fan of Clement. Obviously, you can't hold him to the same standard as like a Francisco Lindor or Jose Ramirez, but he's a guy that could well outplay a lot of, underratedly, just a lot of teams and their utility guys throughout the league. But, just to bring up another guy that we brought up earlier on in the podcast, Luke Maile. He's expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks with a hamstring strain. So another question mark: who's going to be backing up Austin Hedges? Like,
It's a mess.
where are we doing right now? And then Lavastida, he's already on the 40 man, but he's struggling in spring. He needs a little bit more minor league time. And Sandy Leon, as expected, not really doing anything offensively this spring, but he's more than likely going to be the options to back up Hedges. We've seen him on this franchise before, right? This organization, we're just bringing back another familiar face, but certainly not a guy that's going to win you games, right? Just more like get you through the game.
Yeah, like he's just a body to put back there. Like he'll do his job behind the plate. He's not going to hurt you defensively. Right. He'll do his job with the pitching staff, but I just hate that not only is right field a black hole, but our catching spot's a black hole. And I said early on in this podcast, like you can't afford to not upgrade either of those positions. And now we're already starting to see, like, we got a catching injury. You know, the guy who nobody was excited about when they signed him, that guy's hurt. And now you're in a predicament where you added Brian Lavastida to the 40-man roster when he's not necessarily ready to play at the major league level, but you wanted to protect him for a Rule 5 draft that didn't even end up happening. And now you're in this pickle where it's like, well, shoot, the only other guy we have in camp is Sandy Leon, and he's not even on the 40-man roster. You know, there's Bo Naylor, but he's behind Lavastida, and he's definitely not ready. But, you know, neither of those guys are even on the 40-man roster, so you're going to have to make another move to get Sandy Leon on the 40-man roster, and we're looking at the same issue in the bullpen, and we haven't even left Goodyear yet. And that's the risk you take when you add all these kids who aren't ready yet to the 40-man roster.
Bring me back to the days where we had two Gold Gloves behind the plate, like Yan Gomes just taking over the primary pitchers, and then you just had some kid named Roberto Perez doing everything else for you. Like, what a luxury we used to be living a couple years back.
I would have really liked to see him re-sign Yan Gomes, actually. I'm disappointed they didn't do that.
I remember I went to a New York Mets versus Nationals game. It was a boring game, you know, if you're a fan of pitching, right? I would only say I'm a fan of pitching when it comes to the Guardians, right? But if you go out to another stadium and it's two teams that you don't necessarily care about, you want to see some action. This game was tied like 1-1 or 2-2 all the way up until the 8th inning. Yan Gomes sends a 3-run homer deep, right? And the Mets, you know, it's always fun watching New York fans go home unhappy. So it was fun getting to see him play and have a good time. And man, I just wish we had those days back. But, you know, another guy that we always talk about, Jose Ramirez. Andre Knott reported last week that Rafa Neves, which is Jose Ramirez's agent, he was in Goodyear discussing a contract extension with the team. We've yet to hear anything significant on that, more just that the talks are ongoing, but I'm sure they've been ongoing for the better part of the last 2 years. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but so an agent later disputed that the reporting that he was in LA, but Andre Knott stayed firm with his sources, believing that talks were truly happening. So what are your thoughts on that, Mel?
I think it's still possible that they were negotiating. He doesn't necessarily have to be in Goodyear. I mean, he could have his people, you know, go to Goodyear if it was an in-person type of deal, or like we're doing right now, there's Zoom. You know, they could be doing things over, but with the team not spending any money externally, I don't see any scenario where they're not at least talking to the guys internally. And Ramirez is going to be the first guy they go to before Bieber, before Franmil Reyes. They're definitely going to talk to Jose Ramirez before either one of those guys. So I have to believe that talks are happening. I don't think the Dolans and Chris Antonetti are dumb. You know, they know they at least have to try to re-sign him. And they did with Francisco Lindor too. You know, reports at that time said they were willing to give Lindor over $240 million to keep him. And once he said no to that, they kind of gave up on that, which is understandable, especially because we know the shortstop talent we have in this organization. But as far as Jose goes, I think he's a guy, just the value he brings at third base, I think he's a guy you really have to pull out all the stops and get him to finish his career in a Cleveland Guardians uniform. I think that could salvage a small portion of the fan base who's just fed up and done right now. If they see you forked out some money to keep your MVP, I think that'd go a long way in restoring some good faith with the fans.
if we could dump some cash and just save Jose Ramirez, Shane Bieber, Franmil Reyes, and one of those other core pitching guys, whether it be most likely Savali. Look, if you want to spend all of your cash, all of your, let's call it $30 million. I don't care if you spread out $3 million worth for the rest of the team. Because those are the guys that every fan knows of, and those are the guys that people show up to the ballpark for. But if they're not playing for us, who do you expect to show up, right? Just kids who want to get a good experience, right? And parents who are just trying to get them out of the house, right? It's not going to be fans showing up expecting a good season. It's really just going to be like, okay, it's Sunday, we have to buy our time doing something, and tickets are $8 for bleachers. So yeah, I mean, bottom line, we got to get the guys who have served their time here and done a phenomenal job doing so, and guys like that I just mentioned. I know Franmil Reyes has only spent two seasons with us so far.
Yeah.
But if he can stay healthy, that's always just been his problem. I mean, he's always producing. I've never really had a problem with Franmil Reyes in the lineup. It's just he'll have an occasional little bleach strain or something with his shoulder or his calf, right? So that'll sideline him a couple of weeks throughout the season. But yeah, bottom line, we got to start paying guys. I'm sick of watching this team and everybody that comes up through our rankings and makes their way onto the team and plays with playoff experience. They just walk because we can't afford them anymore. And that's certainly no longer an excuse now that you're giving us a team with a $34 million payroll. That's just not acceptable. But I did want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. It was a bit of a longer episode, but there was tons to talk about. A lot of lowlights, but a couple highlights as well. So I'm just going to keep the message the same. Stay patient. We still have we're counting down to 10 or 11 days out now from opening day. So guys, we're almost there. And bit by bit, we're going to get to this season, and I can't wait to face the Kansas City Royals come April 7th. We have a 5-game series with them to start out the season, so that'll be a first. And then, we're going to be bringing in some interleague play. So the San Francisco Giants come for our first homestand of the year. So Mel and I will definitely be previewing a little bit more about what to expect in the first weeks of the season next week. But always be sure to give us a follow at BelieveInMediaLLC.com. Give us a follow on all the platform decks, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything there is, we're on it, as well as YouTube. Rate, subscribe, share, and thanks for joining us. I'm going to kick it off to Mel to end the show.
Yeah, I'll definitely say to close, I did not expect the super utility job to be the most heated competition of the spring, but here we are. That kind of describes the current state of this team right now. When you don't bring anybody in to be excited about, we're hyper-focused on the super utility spot. And luckily, they've all been hitting, so it's been fun. But everybody who's kind of frustrated like we are and is venting about it, just try and remember that this team last year, before the injuries to the entire starting rotation, we were extremely competitive. We were only a couple games behind the White Sox. And that was with no offense from behind the plate and no offense in the outfield. And I do think some of these guys, even if they do make the roster out of spring training, I think guys like Bradley Zimmer and Bobby Bradley are going to be on a shorter leash, and we'll see, Gabriel Arias and Richie Palacios and some other kids, sooner rather than later. So let's go cheer on our Guardians in this inaugural season. We're starting the countdown to opening day. So I want to thank everybody for listening. And until next week, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Guardians.